all local based in jazz, blues, R&B, soul, funk, and rock. They include Jeremy Davenport, who plays every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at the Ritz-Carlton. Kermit Ruffins, he's got a couple of regular gigs, Tuesdays at Bullets and Thursdays at Vaughn's. Henry Butler, great blues pianist and R&B and singer. He's actually, Katrina displaced him to Denver, and now he's up in Brooklyn, New York. So he's recorded for everybody from, I guess, from Wyndham Hill to MCA to Basin Street, and we've done 3 records with him. Teresa Anderson, who's a indie rock artist, recently on Conan O'Brien and on Craig Ferguson's shows. She just got done with 4 weeks in Sweden, where she hit the pop charts at number 8. Dr. Michael White, who's a traditional jazz clarinetist here in New Orleans. He has a couple of different configurations, a few configurations. He plays with a brass band, the original Liberty Brass Band, and the Liberty Jazz Band. John Cleary, who plays with John Schofield right now. He's also been out on the road for years with Bonnie Raitt, with Taj Mahal, with B.B. King. He's got his own band, John Cleary and the Absolute Monster Gentlemen. Last week he started a new configuration that's a trio. Los Hombres Calientes, we recorded 5 records for them, and they are a Latin jazz, Afro-Cuban funk, salsa, samba, mambo,
the best.
Everything.
They are the best.
Actually, they've been on kind of a hiatus since the storm. Irvin Mayfield and Bill Summers were the co-leaders of that band. Irvin tonight and tomorrow night has actually kind of resurrected the music and is doing a series of shows that are all going to charity, where all the money's going to charity. Irvin has a club on Bourbon Street at the Royal Sonesta Hotel, and he plays on Wednesday nights there regularly, but this past week he's played there each night playing the music of Los Hombres Calientes. They were Grammy nominees, Billboard Latin Music Award winners, and actually 4 of their 5 records were Billboard Latin Music Award finalists. Irvin as a solo artist as well, plays more of a modern jazz. He's done 5 records for us in that configuration. Jason Marsalis has done a couple of records for us. He's a more modern jazz, unbelievable drummer. And the Headhunters did a record for us, all the original members of the Headhunters except for Herbie Hancock. So we have a wide range of music. All these guys, like I said, living in New Orleans, and most of their band members as well. And I'll pass it on.
Chuck Harrison, ladies and gentlemen.
My name is Chuck Harrison, and I guess it's hard to follow what he just finished saying because we are new at this business. One Way Music Group is a new entity. We represent a whole genre of music, too many to name right now, and I don't want to bore everybody with what we represent. I'm from radio. I've been involved with radio for about 40 years, and I work with major record labels as well as do promotions now. But I just wanted to go ahead and get this panel started, so we have a lot of other things that we need to come to the table with.
And we'll also say, I'm from New York, and your loss with Henry Butler has definitely been our gain up there. To watch Henry make an appearance, just come up and sit in with folks, it's mind-boggling. It just happened a couple weeks ago. Sarah Wasserman, Rob Wasserman's daughter, was playing up at Joe's Pub, and Henry came in, and it was like, wow, he rocks.
I haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah, he's terrific. Real quick background on me. Actually, 40 years is it's kind of a number here. I started in radio August 27th, 1967. Wow, that's a long time ago. I went through several markets with radio. Then I went with things that we affectionately used to call major labels. Now we just call them multinational entities that are in the same painful situation as the rest of us. Except they have more money to lose, I guess. That's the only thing. And for the past 13, 14 years, I've run a company called the WNS Group, which stands for We Never Sleep, because that's all I could come up with when the DBA was. I do manage a Louisiana-based artist along with, by the name of Sonny Landreth, and have for 12 years. In addition to management, also run an independent promotion company which features work with both AAA and Americana artists, and that's our deal. The overriding, and it's funny because I've been sitting here actually going through a couple of these panels. In the last panel, we had a gentleman from Selecta Hits saying one of the prerequisites or one of their guides is radio airplay. If you sat in the A&R meeting yesterday, or if you sat here and watched, you saw radio minimized. And I think it's interesting. In my position, I do a lot of work with the multinationals, Universal Group, EMI, Concord Music, Sony, and et cetera. And in the beginning of every single project these days, I will tell you flat out, radios, we've got the kids over in the viral part, we've got this kid who's got a site, and he's doing this, and then we're twittering, and it's kind of like it gets to the point with a record generally pretty quickly. I don't know whether you all enjoy, there was a survey that just came out. Europe, you probably realize the fact that they've abandoned religion is a bad idea. But at the end of the day, there was a survey recently came out, a study that showed that Europeans, as they approach that hour, when they're about ready to take that black boat across the dark harbors and into the next place, two things they ask for are God and mother. So, and that's kind of the same thing that happens with record companies. They dismiss radio, but at the end of the day, they're only saving gross because the only answer they have is radio. And it is changing by the minute. I mean, every time you sit there, we're all talking about evolutionary change in this, in what we do in the so-called music business. I work in a situation which is a balance between NPR stations and a lot of independent radio stations, very few of the multinational chains, or not multinational, but national chains. There aren't that many Clear Channel, there aren't that many Cumulus, there are not that many Citadel stations. But they're a mess. Those groups, I will tell you flat out, they're a mess. I mean, anybody who takes a look at, just studies the situation, the debt service of Clear Channel at this point, realizes the last thing that's on their mind is what kind of music they're playing. They don't care. We're providing interludes between commercials for them if they can sell advertising. That's basically what it comes down to. At this point, they've allowed their situations go back to regional vice presidents and regional managers who are dictating and trying to cut deals to get records on the radio. So the old days of payola, in case anybody hadn't figured out, are as flourishing as they ever were. Elliot Spitzer decided to go out and get laid by somebody, by a young girl, and as a result, then it was off to the races again. Because once he was out of commission, all the blinders were off. So it's as bad now as it ever has been, and it's getting increasingly worse. But meanwhile, the audience, unfortunately, for all of it, is going down. The lower end of the demographics, in case this doesn't come as a newsflash to anybody, but kids are not listening to the radio. I have a 14-year-old who couldn't tell you what radio station, and by the way, also embarrassingly, I might add, hasn't bought a piece of music, although he's in an iPod and a computer that's full of music. But he doesn't care. He doesn't care the fact that what he's getting on peer-to-peer at this point, or et cetera, has radio station bladder over the top of it, just as long as he's got the new Green Day and et cetera. But they don't listen to radio. So we're all fighting for a diminishing group of public at this point, and that public generally is 25 to infinity, whatever it is. And for the most part, that demographic, the infinity part, is the part that nobody wants. I'm not in anybody's demographic, and I know there's a couple of you in this room are probably nobody's demographic either. But still, it's a very valuable part. So part of the discussion we're in today is, Mark, you've got with your roster, which is very extensive, what's the impact of, first of all, I think probably, it says in this spiel about the fact it's internet, satellite, and terrestrial radio. What is impacting you these days?
We use, when we put music out on the radio, we will use one of a variety of promoters to help us get there. If it's a jazz release, we'll use a company called Groove Marketing, generally out of California and out of Portland. I believe they're partners in Portland.
Right.
And we'll send it out to maybe 600 copies of our record. Sometimes 2 and 3 to the same station, the music director or program director. And whatever we get, we get. We're talking about jazz radio, so we're talking about college radio stations and some NPR stations. And I brought some sheets here y'all can take a look at. Our new release is Jeremy Davenport's We'll Dance Till Dawn. It's been out for about 4 weeks. It's number 16 on the CMJ chart, It's chart bound on the Jazz Week chart. Those are the two charts for jazz radio. It had 50 spins last week. So 50 spins in over 50 states, that's one spin a week per state. That doesn't sell any records, you know. But that puts it at number 16 on the CMJ chart. That puts it at chart bound. That puts it at like number 53 in the country. One spin per week per state. So that's, you know, you have to stumble upon it. So for our jazz releases, it's just, you know, if we get some play, great. And often what we'll spend $3,000 for a jazz promoter. But we're going to do it every time. We have to put the product out there. Our artists expect us to send it to several hundred, you know, to a few hundred stations. But the reality is that, talking about payola, it would probably be cheaper for us just to go ahead and send everybody $2 than to spend the $3,000 on the radio promoter, so that we end up with a over 2-month, 3-month period of what's going to accumulate to maybe 2,000 spins or 1,000 spins. And that's the jazz. Now, we've reached out a little further with some of our other releases, like a Teresa Anderson, where we've hired maybe 2 or 3 radio promoters. But again, I don't know that I've ever had a situation where the cost benefit came to our favor.
You know, let me just, one big question about for Teresa. We had, by the way, last release, I mean, there was some significant, on paper it looked like there was some significant play. The question, were you able to quantify that any place where play in a particular market? And now it's hard these days because we don't have stores like they used to, but
there is, you know, we get SoundScan reports every week. If we're a small company, we have 2 part-timers and me at full-time as far as in the house. We also have a number of independent contractors. But for me, I could sit there and evaluate the entire, did this radio play in this market impact us? But the reality is we're talking about 15 or 20 or 30 CDs sold in a particular market at a particular time. Most of it is driven by her performance in those cities. Most of it is driven by touring, and most of it is by, when we do get some radio play in a market, it's because they're also going to tour there and they're doing interview, or we're sending a few CDs for a contest, that sort of thing. But it's not generally because it's just picking up steam. And I will say this: we've had we've had #1 records on the jazz chart, where we've had 150 or 200 spins in a week, and it all has an impact overall when you're talking about radio play and press, and when it all comes together, it does have some impact for sure.
But this is not mainstream radio that you're talking about. See, we have a problem because how do we get our music on the radio? Because we are in the hip-hop, R&B. We can't go to Citadel or Clear Channel because they're not playing our music. We can't contact a program director. We can't contact a music director. You know, a lot of these things that we just spinning our wheels, and what people don't realize is that the money that you're spending, that you're talking about, first of all, you got to go in the studio, record. You got to press it. You got to put it out there. You know, you mail stuff out. What happens with it from that point on? You know, you still have to beat bushes to try to get your music on the radio. And we're having problems right now. We got some great music that we can share with radio stations, but the bottom line is that who's listening to you? You can't call a radio station to get your music on. So we're having problems, you know, from the hip-hop to the R&B to the gospel to whatever music genres of music that we have. So it's going to be a major fight to get our music on and to promote it the way it should be promoted.
If you break down some of the genres within that, I understand the problem with rap, hip-hop. I mean, that is they've really, this is one of the places where a lot of independents have just been totally aced out of the situation. It is economically not feasible. I mean, there's a lot of different things. But let's just go back to gospel for a second, for instance. Within that, is it the same? Are you facing the same thing within that?
It's the same thing with gospel. I mean, we have some a hit album out here, you know, that we can't sell. You know, we have 3 or 4 acts that we have gospel-wise. You know, it's the same thing because the Clear Channel, the Citadels, the Cumulus, all of these stations are suits. They are the same people that you have to take R&B and hip-hop, and all hip-hop is not negative. we have some positive stuff because we don't even accept negative music to our label. We want to get our music out there like anybody else. We have great artists, even it's just a matter of putting stuff together and getting things done. But the crazy part about it, as you said, gospel music, man, gospel is just like hip-hop and R&B. We're fighting battles.
I'm working a record right now for Solomon Burke. It's Clarence Fountain from the Blind Boys and Sam Butler. And Solomon got on the phone and started, here's Solomon Burke calling radio stations. It's like begging. And you know what? About 1 out of every 4 stations actually taking the phone call. And you go, wow. Are you kidding me? It's Solomon Burke. What you think, but are you kidding me? You can't pick up the phone and talk to this guy?
Let me tell you something. I'm promoting records as we speak. The bottom line, every radio station you call today, you will not get a return call. You email them, you drop your music off. Like I said, it costs money to make them. It costs money to get it there. It costs money to follow up because cell phones, telephones, all that costs you money. And the bottom line is that all we want is a fair shake, getting our music on the radio,
That underlines, by the way, you're going to hear, through the course of this, you're going to hear a lot about independent promotion. Basically, through independent promotion at all levels, what you are buying is access. Exactly what he's talking about. It's either based on personal relationships, long-standing. Unfortunately, I happen to work in a field where it is more, I've known these guys for 30 years, 35 years, so you do have the ability to get through, and it is not a pay-for-play situation. You're not in a scenario like that. But for the most part, that's what the relationships are built on. When you're talking about these group VPs of Clear Channel, you're talking about access. There's money on the table. That's period, end of report. You are buying your way into it, and it's not direct access, but it's their access representing your act. So you don't know at the end of the day, by the way, what's being said about your artist, and that's a pretty scary situation all the way across the board. One thing I do wonder about in both of you guys actually is, college radio for a long time was very dismissed. It was one of those things for the past couple of years. It's really gotten a tough rap because it started to parallel everything else that was out there. You had a bunch of kids who no longer had a sense of adventure. They were playing the same stuff that was on commercial radio. I am finding an evolution is happening here, that it is starting to go back to a scenario where people are getting interventions. I'm just trying to figure out what kind of impact it's having on you guys especially. And, is it a place at least to get access at this point?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, TUL was one of my favorite stations here when I promoted music in this area, which I probably will stop in there sometime soon and promote some music there. But yeah, I get great access from the college stations, Grambling,
right.
The radio station, and you're talking about jazz, WBRH, high school jazz station in Baton Rouge. They're,
wow, it's
great station, man.
By the way, it's a tremendous outlet. This radio station, it plays everything. From soup to nuts. But within the context of what they do, there's pretty much, no matter what you're making, unless it's like Latvian polka music, which there may actually be a slot for it up there, but they will play. There's a slot for everything on that radio station.
Music,
it's incredible. It's mind-boggling.
Absolutely.
It's really great.
And I'll add this. At some of these stations, again, take a WWOZ here in New Orleans, which is, my favorite station in the world. I can walk in there just about any time and put something on that hasn't even been mastered if I wanted to, and talk about it. But WWOZ, obviously, the reach that the internet gives us. And when they've got a programmer and they say, let's take calls, they'll get calls from all over the world. So it is and a lot of that, obviously that doesn't get measured on these charts. So if we get the 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 spins a week that we might get on WWOZ, then those are being heard. People are actually tuned in. It's a real, the family feel of that station is tremendous. And so it has more of an impact, let's say. And there's a few stations around the country where our artists have gone in and done live interviews, or they've done live performances, and we get more, the relationship starts to build. So we can go into KUVO in Denver or the station in Miami and get a little more opportunity. When we have an artist go play there, we're able to get a CD giveaway done, or have some mentions, or maybe we have to buy a little underwriting spot. Or if we go to WBGO up in New Jersey, we're on their radar. So when one of the NPR types of things comes together, like Jazz Set, syndicated radio program, or something like Nick Spitzer down here in New Orleans, his American Roots radio program, those obviously have tremendous impact for us. When we know that we've got a program that talked about, let's say American Roots, they did their 10th anniversary show and they had Michael White perform, and they recorded that and they played on 200 stations. Well, that does have a big impact for us. So maintaining those relationships and spending the money throughout and consistently ultimately has some nice impact. And I'll say this too. Take WWOZ, you have to be aware of what they're doing at the station. Like right now they're playing Celtic music right at this moment. Mm-hmm. But later on in the day they'll be playing some brass band music. Later, so in each day, every morning they're playing traditional jazz in the morning from 8 to 11. They're playing New Orleans, kind of a smorgasbord of New Orleans music in the middle of the afternoon. So you need to start to service all of the various programmers. Each of those guys that come in, these volunteer programmers at these stations, they all bring in their own music. They all want to create their own show. And even though there might be a station on WWZ has everything on a computer now. But even though there may be a copy of it there, each programmer wants to feel like they're putting together their own show, and they bring in their own music. Sometimes it's on vinyl, sometimes it's on CD, and they're creating something. So those personal impact is real important there.
We're going to focus a lot on public radio within the context of this, and largely because of the fact that the commercial it's sort of out of bounds at this point. Well, you know what? It does suck. I mean, yeah, it's terrible. I mean, I blame, a lot of the problems that I perceive with my own kids and a lot of other kids and et cetera on the fact that it's unlistenable. I mean, trying to play Akon next to Britney Spears, a kid goes, what? What are you talking about? It's terrible. But does everybody understand what public radio, how it works? I mean, because I think this is something where, and I do it a lot, and I've been doing it a lot more recently, whatever they can pitch that brings money in wins. I mean, if we've got a situation in New York, there's a radio station in the Bronx by the name of WFUV. It's Fordham Radio. It's Fordham University Radio. It happens to be a pretty terrific format. They have Celtic programming on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, which raises, when they fundraise, 3 times what the Monday through Friday broadcasting brings in. That Celtic broadcasting basically gives them their operating budget for the entire year. Now, there's probably not a good reason, even in New York, for 24/7 Celtic radio. But within the context of this idea of going, and we just had a situation in the New York metropolitan area. A bunch of kids from Trenton went into a radio station in South Orange, WSOU, which is up to this point has been 20 years, 15, 20 years, it's been heavy metal. I mean, it's just, you turn it on, you get a headache. You even get near that position on the dial, you get a headache. But a bunch of kids went to him and said, you know what? We think that we can bring you music, hip-hop, that will fit with your programming. And that hip-hop now, the programming is spread from 2 hours to 3 hours to 4 hours on a signal that, by the way, engulfs the entire tri-state area. I mean, you can hear this every place. And you know how they did it? They went out before they approached the program director and they said, listen, they went to businesses in the community. Talked about underwriting. Underwriting is how it's done at this point. It's fundraising. It's direct. That's one-on-one. Fundraising when your radio stations are on the air going, listen, send me $3, one for the father, one for the son, and one for me. It's one of those deals. But underwriting is a big part of the pitch here. So before they even approached the guy, they went and they got the guys. They knew what they had. They said, listen, we got a solid 2 hours every day. And you know what? If we expand upon that thing, then we can get more. Because the rap, and I will tell you flat out, for instance, within the hip-hop community, it will always be, and the rap has always been, with any form of so-called minority radio. Well, the numbers are great, but advertising's tough because the demographics, are not right. The money is not right. The income levels are not right. It's bullshit, by the way. I mean, it is flat out bullshit. But as long as the perception becomes some sort of twisted reality. In this particular case, that's where I think, this is where, and it doesn't make any difference. It's just not about hip hop. It's about, if you want to play cowboy music, if you want to, whatever it is you're pushing, and you're taking a look, because a lot of conversations been going on around about your own local community. What can you do where you are to build yourself up, to get yourself booked in a club, can get booked yourself, or can you guys as a collective with a bunch of other artists who share the same interests, who share the same, feel for a genre of music, what can you do? That's a prime example. But start working on it. That's one of the places where you can pick it up. Similarly, we've got jazz represented pretty well down here at the end. The rap on jazz is what? Demographic is?
About 2% of the buyers.
Well, it's an aging demographic. Everybody will tell you that there's nobody, but have you seen any clear demonstration of that? I mean,
and if you go see a Kermit Ruffins or Jeremy Davenport, there's no indication that it's an aging demographic.
It's been one of those raps on it. It's been very easy to dismiss. It's been very easy to, for a bunch of guys to go, well, listen, Jesus, jazz, it's old guys. Look at the artists. Most of them are dead. Yeah. Well, no, that's not. It's not. I mean, it's not. It's impractical. It's ridiculous. The whole premise is ridiculous. But I think that here's a prime situation where, once again, if you are a jazz musician, if you represent something, work with your local radio station, go on them and say, listen, I got Bob's Barbecue Joint, and he's lined up, and he's going to sponsor half hour, and then I got this guy who sponsored another half hour, and I got this guy who's going to sponsor another half hour.
That's how you do it. You're buying sponsorship.
Well, but you're not doing it yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't be in a situation as the artist or as the label. Yeah. What you should be able to do is pick it up and take it to the community and sell it.
Well, I think some of the people have done that.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people are doing it, especially what you're talking about, like OZ, I think, places like that. WBRH, I think they have benefits.
Yeah, they definitely do.
They do a lot of stuff like that. But jazz, what type of jazz we're talking about? New Orleans jazz or traditional jazz music? Because you don't have a jazz station here.
No.
So how do you promote that?
Yeah, I mean, there aren't but a few jazz stations left. I mean, that are 24-hour jazz stations. And the top, I'm passing around out there our latest round of reports. There's, I believe, KTSU is call letters over in Houston. That may be 24-hour jazz still, but I don't really know too many others. WBGO, but
you had a jazz station here before, Easy Jazz or something like that.
Well, we've had there's more smooth jazz. There's more smooth jazz stations.
That's a format that sort of deservedly kind of went away.
But those come and go very quickly. The smooth jazz formats, and and I don't play the game. I won't play. I'm not. We're talking about some of the dollars. When we have played the game, trying to get out to with a indie rock or something, we've spent $50,000 for what amounted to 4 o'clock in the morning play in second and third level cities like Birmingham or Montgomery. We'll get, and that's what you start to get when these stations do agree to play your music, and you hire the radio promoter, and that radio promoter has their relationships with the stations, which may be on the fuzzy side, whatever. You'll end up getting like a 4 o'clock in the morning airplay that gets reported. So.
Well, we got to jump into. There's got to be some access here someplace along the line. How many people here are listening to internet radio? And on the internet, do you listen to a lot of the same site, or are you chasing around finding? Are you using it like you use your car radio? Are you chasing around to find? Yeah? Who do you listen to?
Radio Paradise.
Wow. You like that, huh?
It's a variety. It has just a very wide variety of good songs, but they all,
Are they identifying what they play? Just
Oh, yeah, they have a playlist.
so you're seeing it as it goes along, right?
And you click on it, they'll show the whole artist, like notes, and then they'll have users commenting, a log of comments on that song and that, what they think they rate the song and all this stuff.
All right, another quick, what do you,
Also, you can set up a playlist where you play the artists that you really like. They'll play different artists in that genre.
so it's like you're creating your own jukebox out of this stuff.
I like a lot of R&B and funk. That's what I hear most. You won't be jumping around. I like hip hop and gospel. You'll hear into what you really like. Artists that you, similar artists that you really like.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yeah. That, by the way, is where my son and I think all his little band of criminals are out ripping all the music off from, because that's,
I think that's the biggest.
Can I comment on that real quick?
yeah.
That, you know, I have 3 teenagers who would never burn, they would never steal music. And it's a matter, on that point, it's a matter of teaching, I really believe. Because if somebody really realized that I would not put out any more Kermit Ruffins records if everybody was just stealing them, and if they really realized the amount of effort that goes in, I don't think they'd steal. It is real easy to steal a candy bar from a convenience store. But we don't do it because we were taught it was wrong. It's real easy to steal music, but you just should not do it because it's wrong, and kids need to be taught that.
Not to get off the subject of radio, but, you know, I don't download music. I know a lot of people that do. And I think a lot of the response is that to the major labels. We all know, and we've had people that were on labels on boards talking about do it yourself, because the contract's so one-sided. I'd rather see an artist, especially I know metal artists, most of those guys buy CDs. They'll download it first. If the band's terrible, they don't want to pay $19 or $15 to get one song that's good and the rest is trash. They listen to it first. They're stuck out $15. They don't go see the band. I consider their promotion a tool at this point.
That argument is fine if the band puts it out there for promotional purposes, which, you know, we give away a lot of free music, but it's our choice to give it away, or the band's choice to give it away. You know, I've never tried a $100,000 bar, but just the fact that I'm not gonna steal one to taste it, just to see whether I really want to buy one or not.
Huh.
But let's stay on the subject.
Well, no, I mean, you got a good point. You know, it just, quite frankly, I don't know how to stop it. I think, you
It's
know,
almost impossible to stop it.
it got out of the box. You know, it got away. I will admit, in my particular case, it got out of the box early. And, you know, I don't think he was the first one to go into the water. I know he wasn't. But, boy, once he was in, it's like, I don't know. Anyways, what about the satellite radio? Who's got? You like it? Now, which one? Well, have they? When I haven't figured this out. When is it going to come together? Well, they, yeah.
They merge, but they still sell them as two separate.
Right, 2 separate services. I mean, isn't at the end of the day, this has got to be, because they've eliminated off of XM some of these services that were off of there and off of Sirius. So a lot of the competitive stuff has been eliminated at this point. But you're still not getting both sides of the equation.
They added, XM added some channels to Sirius added some. There's some commonality between.
Right. The question always comes, I mean, what is radio ultimately at the end of the day, aside from an avenue, because we're at a music conference, obviously we're talking about it as a thing for music, as an area for music, but with respect to how many of you are listening to the radio on the internet, or music on the internet, how many are listening to satellite radio, which, by the way, you know, that's a situation where it's all voice track. You know, there's nothing live on any of that stuff. The jocks go in, they voice track that stuff over a 3-hour, they'll do a 9-hour shift in 2.5 hours or whatever. So it's not live. None of it is. None of it's live. So, I mean, you know, it's all loaded in the computer. They all plug it in and et cetera. There's no immediacy. You know, it's funny because I happen to be up in Sirius. I live outside the city, so I'm in the city pretty often. And the day after Michael Jackson died, I was up at Sirius, and they had this huge meeting. I mean, how do we address this? You know, they went into a mode where they weren't prepared for, and they got their asses kicked, by the way. I mean, it was like everybody else was, you know, playing 24/7 Michael Jackson music and talking about what was going on, and, you know, the charts were off the roof. Meanwhile, if you flipped over to Sirius, you flipped over to XM, was nothing there. I mean, it was because they can't react. They don't have the ability to react. Similar situation, you know, and this is one of the biggest, we've seen where consolidation didn't work. You know, the tremendous debt service is not, they can't service the debt. They don't have the local advertising to do it. So, you know, they're shifting money from one pile to the next pile to the next pile. It's all around. And it's Clear Channel ultimately will collapse, or the Chinese will pick it up just like everything else. And it'll be, we'll all be doing one from column A and one from column B radio. But at the end of the day, is there a fear out there that we are going to lose? Is radio's relevance going to ultimately fade to, in an era where newspapers are going away very rapidly? Is it no longer a relevant news source? I mean, is it no longer, are we listening to radio for the information to break in, say, you know, Ted Kennedy passes away, whatever it is. Is it no longer, are we prepared to get to that point? Because you're going to get to it pretty quickly. You have all these national formats. You know, I just, the other day, I saw where Tom Joyner now is going to, Tom Joyner is going to do a show. He's going to do it twice, I think, live a week, and the rest of the time he's going to do it. My understanding is he's going to tape all those shows for the rest of the week. I mean, once again, how, you know, here's Ryan Seacrest is going to, you know, he's on, I think, 124 different radio stations across the country. Ryan Seacrest in your morning, and he's doing all of his shows in one day. You know, it's like they're going and banging these things out. Does this mean, and we've got quite a split in this group age-wise, I mean, and I'm throwing this out for anybody to respond to. What's your feeling about the relevance of radio?
I think radio will continue to be relevant as from a couple of different scenarios. One, as long as you have automobiles until they can connect to the internet or until they, or XM, satellite radio has got to be there, but as long as you have cars, and cars continue to be in FM, you're generally going to have those people that can be cars listen to that. You're going to be the broad bottom of the.
But you're going to have internet access. You're going to have internet access by next year's models.
But the majority of the people, of course, are going to cost.
Yeah.
Automobiles right now, you just had cash for concrete. They're not putting it in there.
Right.
And so your general public and your volume public that's wide at the bottom are going to be people who are traditional listeners to AM and FM and whatever else can be put in the car. From what I do, from a legal aspect, it is very relevant because many of the record companies, if you're interested in signing a label, they're purely going off of BDS. They don't give a damn on what's selling in markets. They look at the computer and see what's selling BDS and sometimes media.
But does everybody understand, by the way, does everybody understand when the young man speaks about BDS what it is? All right, BDS is, there's several different monitoring services available. There's BDS, there's Media Guide, Media Base, and they actually monitor spins.
That's what I just passed around, by the way, as a media.
Right.
Oh, okay.
This is where they have set up in major markets, and it, by the way, it's based on, I love always saying this, it's based on the same, it's not a big scientific breakthrough. What they do is they take the raw data and project it out over many markets with the same, it's the same type of data research and usage that predicted that Harry Truman was going to beat by Tom Dewey in 1948. So it does, there's some fallacies in the whole operating program that this stuff is under. But here's a unique scenario, and it happens pretty dramatically within the R&B community. There are places that the major labels are manipulating this pretty dramatically. There are things called spin doctors, spin centers. There's a radio station in Roanoke, Virginia, that will spin your record 180 times in a week. Now do the math. If your song's 3 minutes long, but all of a sudden that record goes from no place to, and by the way, this is all done to determine chart position, ultimately.
And sales.
Right.
And sales.
Right. But it goes, I mean, you know, it goes from no place to 3. Well, you know, you got 180 of those spins are in Roanoke. Now, listen, wonderful place. It's really pretty down there. They have horses. They have, but you know, not selling many records in Roanoke. I mean, it's just not happening.
So is that station that's not broadcasting?
No, it is broadcasting. It's a real radio station. But the guy, exactly. I mean, you know, the guy knows what he's got. He's stuck in, he doesn't want to be in Roanoke, Virginia. But as long as he's got to be there, he might as well get taken care of. I mean, you know, it's like if you hate your situation, you might as well deal with it.
You know, the other thing that he's talking about, as well as Marcus, the crazy part about what he's talking about, BDS, it's like a fingerprint. You know, they detect your records. You submit your music to BDS, Nielsen. They will detect that song throughout the country, wherever it's played at. That's how you get these spins. From what I understand, as far as some of the deals are concerned, you know, for major record labels, you get between 300 and 500 spins, and then maybe a record company or record label will look at you and say, okay, well, maybe this is the artist that we need. But this is how it's done, through spins.
Do they have a way of checking whether it was done in real estate?
Yes, they do.
It
Yeah,
shows, but it's
charged.
irrelevant.
Yeah.
The relevance is the cumulative total. That has nothing to do with the specifics of where it is.
I mean, if someone is thinking of signing an artist, wouldn't they want to know if it's actual?
Yeah, they have charts. You can inquire about who's spinning your music, what radio station, what country, what state. They can detect that.
Per week, right?
Yeah. You know, I mean, if you hustle it, just like you said, you know, sometimes you have to go and do what you need to do. But if you got friends at the radio station, yeah, they will help you out if you want a deal.
By the way, there are other ways to manipulate it other than just purely. It's the detection system. They don't download your entire song. What they do is they take a sample. They take the hook. So you can actually, if you buy a commercial on that radio station and you take your best shot of a minute 60 or 57 minutes or 57 seconds of music, you can actually buy your spins into it also, because there's a pretty good chance whatever the hook is, it's going to be picked up as a detection. So, you know, I mean, there's a lot of manipulation goes on, and it is part of the game. I mean, there is no ands, ifs, or buts about it. It's part of the game with the labels. The majors or multinationals are in a situation where they use it as one of their prerequisites. They say, you know, you have to have BDS, but also, you know what? Listen, your BDS was not quite where it is, so the deal is really going to be this as opposed to this. You know, it's like we're going to do this as opposed to that. But the relevance for these guys sitting at this table is it puts them in a scenario where how do you win? You know,
Well,
and
not cutting you short, but something you mentioned, even with the detection of the music, I tell most people, most artists, to do an instrumental. Because if you use a music bed behind a commercial, guess what? It's a detection. It counts as a spin as well.
absolutely, no question about it. Future. You know, we've been dealing a lot with the immediacy of now, the past, and et cetera. There is a future out there. You know, aside from the back, I'm going to go back and beat my child into stop screwing in with this stuff. It's all right. Hey, listen, I can do it without feeling any pain or angst, I think. Does anybody have a feeling as to what, personal feeling as to what they would like to see radio do? Where,
I'd like to see radio become more localized again, where we actually have people that live in our area that can decide what music is being played. Personally, I have some kind of connection.
like a live voice as opposed to?
Yes. You can't identify with Tom Joyner. Nobody can identify with Tom Joyner or the host of other people that's on the syndicated radio station. You can't. A lot of jocks are out of jobs right now because of syndication. You got, like you just mentioned, 100+ stations, one guy. Gee whiz, what about the jocks that's out here?
I'd like to see it go back to where New Orleans in the 50s and 60s, we had people like Jack the Cat, Dr. Daddy-O.
Listen, I tell you, I used to come into this market and
Ready,
sit
Teddy?
at WTIX and Bob Mitchell, you know, I mean, and guess what? I mean, you felt like he was going to steal your watch. I mean, you just knew that, you know, you just laid it, you checked your teeth and everything else when you walked out the door. But at the end of the day, you got ticks because Bob Mitchell was a man who knew what to do, and he knew he would put the record on the radio station. You know, listen, it cost you everything and everything else, but you know, there was a major deal, and it was a nationwide deal. Get ticks, because if you got ticks, all of a sudden your whole world opened up. Memphis came, Nashville came, Dallas came. It was like, it was a huge deal. You're absolutely right. I mean, this was This was wild and woolly down here, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. It's not fun anymore. That's part of the problem. Anybody thinks about this, this is not, you know, I'm going to be turning 60 here next year, and it's not one of those deals where I'm going, I love what I do, and I think about the fact that I've had the opportunity for 40 years to get up every morning and say, I'm in rock and roll. You know, this is it. You know, I'm overdressed for what normally when I do my commute to my basement and, you know, and go working. But the reality is that it's a lot. It gets harder every day. Anybody thinks this isn't hard, you know what? Then if you think it's going to be easy, then don't do it, because it takes more sweat than it ever has before. Because what we're talking about here is things like organizing community radio stations. You know, do you realize that, you know, right now the FCC at some point in time is going to they're going to open up a whole lot more of these low-powered radio stations. There's going to be an opportunity around here. There's 18 licenses in New Orleans Parish for low-powered radio stations. I mean, they're sitting there. You organize a community association and where you can go in and, you know what, it's going to cost you money. You got to get, you know, transmitter site, you've got to get et cetera, et cetera. And it's not going to broadcast all over the place. But, you know, if you're trying to hit the inner city of New Orleans, you got a real shot at it. You got a big opportunity. And all those are available to you. So, I mean, there's a big part of the plan. The other thing I will say, and one of the most frustrating things right now with young bands, and I deal obviously with a lot of young roots bands and et cetera. Oh, God, I'm too tired to go to the radio station. What? You're too they're playing your music and you're too tired, huh? Then you know what? Get the fuck off the road. Leave. Just stop. Because you know what? The old guys, and I will say the old guys being guys 40, they are beating their brains in. They are trying everything. They're in the car. I talked to a guy the other day. He got up in Annapolis, Maryland the other day, and I said, listen, I just got you a shot. This is 8 o'clock in the morning. If you can make it to Pittsburgh by 1 o'clock, and guess what? I don't think he brushed his teeth, did anything. He was in the car calling me for directions on how to get there because he's trying to anything he can. Now, this is a guy who's been slogging it out for years. But the kids, forget it. You know, I mean, I will say consistently across the board. And the other thing, and this is a big part of the play, you know, big part of this deal these days too, there is money to be, you know, a lot of these local radio stations, they have money for shows.
That's all part of it.
Well, but I mean, they do have money for shows, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's, you know, you'll have somebody, I had everybody wear this, I work with a label that's got Lettucey, and Lettucey's record, new album, debuted at 14 Bullet this past week. Lettucey's manager turned down an offer at a radio station of $7,500. It was routed. And I'm, you know, and I realized there was probably a good reason for it, but I can't figure out what it was. I mean, what could it possibly cost for that artist not to have gone to that radio station and played a show for that radio station? You know, it's a negative in the marketplace. I mean, you guys, who are artists in here?
You know, most of them.
Okay. You guys have the opportunity, I mean, do you go and perform for radio, on radio stations, every opportunity you get, anytime the door opens? Okay, past WWOZ though. I mean, that's a, can you go up to Baton Rouge, can you do that? I mean, you know, they talked in here before, in the panel before, they talked about going to Jackson, going to Clarksdale, going to, you know, Alexandria, going to, get out in the boonies. You know, there's, I don't know, anybody ever been up in KBON? It's up in Opelousas, I think. Huh?
Yeah, we live in, I'm living in the area.
Right. I mean, that guy, I love this guy. It doesn't make, you could go on really and say, listen, I am the world's greatest flute player, and he'll have you on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's terrific. A bunch of kids show up at his door. He is just looking to get, this is a guy who's looking for community involvement. He is trying to get his audience involved in his deal. And he's on me I get an email from this guy, I would say at least 3 times a week. Do you have anybody in the market? Do you have anybody who can stop by? Do you have anybody who can come in? And once again, it doesn't make any difference. It could be a guy who's imitating Gene Autry or, you know, hip hop. It doesn't make any difference. But those are the things. It's a drive. It's a pain in the ass. You got to get up and get up there. But, man,
And you got to self-promote. You got to self.
Well, that's what it comes down
That's
to.
what it all boils down to.
I mean, you can pay all of us, you can pay me anything you want anytime, and I'd take all the money, trust me. But, there's a point at which you got to do some of this yourself. Yes, sir. What kind of music? Believe it or not, it is, what, roots music? It's, for the most part, it's about I would say the market right now, the market standard is about $3,000 life of project. And life of project, unfortunately, is a little terminal. It doesn't indicate there's an infinity to it, but for the most part, it's about 12 weeks with your project, and that would be myself or any of the peer group.
And they're keeping this in mind that these guys are generally working, I guess, in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 to 20 titles at a time.
Right.
So they get on they're sending emails and they're getting on the radio, they're getting on the phone and pushing people, and then like this week, I got on Groove and I said, look, we've been chart bound, we were back off the chart bound, we're back on chart bound, let's get this thing going. So they might put a little extra emphasis this week on Jeremy Davenport's record, but they're also working about 15 or 20 other records. I recognize that. So they're gonna. So yeah, they're gonna. You got to be the squeaky wheel. That's for sure. Let me also add the idea of these playing for stations. I can't remember the local station here in town. I don't even think they're in the same configuration. But Teresa Anderson did a show here in town at the Howlin' Wolf at the time. Now it's Republic, opening for Howie Day. Big opportunity for her. Worked out great. We've done shows with multiple artists of ours at WMNF in Florida, in Tampa, Florida. Great station.
And
they have
their own shows too.
Yeah,
which is terrific.
Right.
I mean,
we'll play at Skipper's Smokehouse in Tampa, Florida, and they'll promote the show. For weeks in advance. You're getting spins, and then you've got 500 people that show up because it's a WMNF an event. So it's
the best, and there are plenty of opportunities like that. The other thing I will add also, from an independent promotion standpoint, and we are in the bottom rung. I mean, if I could have chosen anything that paid less, I'm not sure what it would have been. But I will say that the majors, because the majors are multinationals, whatever you want to call them at this point, there is more work from them than there ever has been before, because they have cut back their own staffs so severely that they have to third-party just about everything, which I will be honest has put a tremendous squeeze on the independents. Because all of a sudden a major comes to you and says, listen, I've got Van Morrison, I've got Elvis Costello, I've got they hit you with about 9 projects, and you sit there and go, okay, wait a minute. The work level is intense. There's no ands or buts about it, because actually we're in a unique situation where you mention those artists, we all think they're stupendous. Well, there's a lot of these guys that weren't alive when these guys started recording. They're programming radio stations now too. So the struggle is there. But what I'm saying is that if you're going to employ, anybody who's going to employ an independent promoter, you got to promote them. You really, and it's like, just be a pain in the ass. The good news is, with caller ID, I can figure out pretty quickly who's on the line and who's not on the line, and whether I have at that particular moment that 15 or 20 or 30 minutes to spend. And not from a practical standpoint, I'm not going to be able to talk to 300 plus radio stations every week and be able to but just grind it. It's your dime. So no matter who you go with. Now, if we're talking about other formats, we're talking about potential of hundreds of thousands of dollars. To even get in the water these days with a R&B record, you're looking probably at $1.50. That's $150,000. It's a lot of scratch. You got to pretty much figure that you're swinging the bat, and somehow the ball is going to get past the warning track. It's like, there's a shot any place along the line, and I'm going to get, out of the park. And the incremental cost, then once you're on, you'd think, well, now I'm launched, I'm on. it's worse because it goes by single basis, and you get one, then they get really hungry. They know you got it, so they come back and they hit you really hard. It's like they strike that line for the next one. It's and all of a sudden you're $500,000 into something. I actually sat a couple weeks ago. There's a AAA radio summit. It happens every year in Boulder, Colorado, and T-Bone Burnett, who's obviously, this guy is brilliant. He's had some hits recently and sold a lot of records, made a lot of pretty spectacular records. First question that David Dye from the World Cafe asked him in this session was, so how much do you to make a record? And when I could see it as the words were coming out of his mouth, and he said, $500,000. And everybody in the room were going, what are you, huh? What, $500,000? And so they realizing the fact that, there's this, that sort of hit the room. He goes, well, there's me, and there's the musicians, and, it's like making a movie, and it's 20 people. Here's a guy who's making brilliant records, but how many records do you think at the end of the day he's going to make for $500,000 in this economy? Ain't happening. You really got to have somebody who's either got to be just, so firmly convinced that they got a real shot, or they got a lot of money to burn. But I don't find too many of these people left in the business these days. And by the way, also in that spiel, and this is one of the things that he talked about, and it's been a pervasive thing within the context of this conference so far, this idea about giving something away, giving stuff away for free. Everything's given away for free. After a while, there's no value to anything. I heard somebody in the last thing was talking about the fact that it's awful tough to play in New Orleans these days because, there isn't the outlets for a lot of urban music and et cetera. There's all the gigs for, still around for the traditional New Orleans style music and et cetera, but there just isn't. Guess what? It's every place. The venues are going away. You know why? Because a kid sat in his house, he made a record. First of all, we killed this business by making CDs the most easily reproducible thing in the world. It sounded like crap. Compared with what they could have been. So we've put all of this stuff in this mix, and then, okay, here we go. We're going to go out the door, and I'm going to put it on MySpace. Let everybody listen to it on MySpace, and then I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to play a gig, and people are going to come. Well, wait a minute. Where are they going to play? The guy who's putting you in is making what out of doing who from what? It's not happening. So, these places are going. We have, in New York City right now, we've got one outlet to really go to, Joe's Pub for adult music. That's it, period, end of report. That's it. Other than going to the big venues. But there used to be 30 places you could play in the city. There's one blues club in New York, and by the way, it's not very good. But it's there, but it's not very good. So it's a real problem.
I'll say this: the Society of American Travel Writers just ranked New Orleans at #1 for live music.
Right.
All right. New York #2 and Austin #3. So we have that to be proud of here. We've known that around here. There's certainly plenty of it, and plenty of styles.
Yeah.
It's too easy to make a record. It's too easy to broadcast a record. Those are real problems. I heard in another panel that there was 100,000.
151,000 records or something.
It's way too easy. And when there's that many, you definitely have to do things to put yourself near the top of the pile. And the top of the pile, when there's 100,000 of them, may just be being in the top 5,000. And another little stat that I heard earlier was of those 100,000 plus records that are out there, there's only 6,000 of them that sold more than 1,000 copies. So, I don't know whether that's all true or not, but it's probably in the ballpark of being true. So you have to do some things to single yourself out, and it might be that you have to spend a lot of extra money on hiring a promoter so that, I'm guessing that a typical jazz station receives, if there were 100,000 records, and jazz is 2% of the buying, it's probably in the neighborhood of about 2,000, 3,000 records a year or something that are jazz. Would be my guess. And if a radio station is getting 1,500 to 2,000 of them a year, that's a lot each month that they got to sort through. So you better do something. And I'll throw this out there. One of the guys who always ends up like #1 on the jazz charts is Mark Elf. I think he's still around and doing his thing. But one of the reasons he does that is that he has these really great relationships. He shows up at all the what used to be IAJE conferences and all of those kinds of things, and he thanks stations, and he calls the stations, and he's just works hard to create that. And that's also an important thing. If you are getting some play as an artist, we'll help our artists do it, but we'll say it's time to make some thank you phone calls to these stations, or we're always offering to do interviews and things like that. But it's also important just to put the thank you call in, or just write a handwritten note to the program director. Thanks for the play.
And you're right, and not only that, they can do drops for the radio stations as well. So it's a lot of things that you can do to make things. But you mentioned something about $500,000. That's what it takes to promote a record nationally. $500,000 R&B, hip hop,
Right.
basically.
I mean, it's a hard slap and it's a tough reality, but that's the real number. Another thing, by the way, though, and it's funny because I just thought about this. This is becoming more and more prevalent, and it's something that you can also do in conjunction with, we talk about sneaking money in under the doors and et cetera, et cetera. There's a real way to approach some of these radio programmers, though, and you have the opportunity. You can't do it with the chain stations. But if you have an independent operator, oftentimes, and it used to be very prevalent, as a matter of fact, up country a little bit here in Louisiana, up in Lafayette and Unison, et cetera. Local radio stations would become partners with you in trying to bust you open. You made them a partner in your show. I mean, you promote a concert, they'd take, and you cut them in for a piece. There's nothing illegal, by the way, about it, but it's
Yeah, you can do that.
absolutely. It's one of those deals that
What we do.
you go to a guy and you say, listen, here's the deal. Right off the top, I need you to promote this show. I need you to work. I need you to provide, your people for the show. I need you to, et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of the day, you take 25, 30, whatever it is. Bill Ham, who had ZZ Top, he had years ago. That was how Bill built that band. And he did it out of, because he couldn't initially, they were initially called American Blues. Bill Ham went all over the country and basically cut deals with local radio stations, said, listen, you know what? And guess what? They all became partners. And it was he did that for a good long period of time, and everybody made a lot of money at that stuff. So these days, I think what we're essentially saying up here is you got to be flexible. I mean, you got to come up with ideas. And no matter how wacky the idea is, take a shot. The heck, you know what? I mean, you can be wrong. You can always be wrong, but guess what? You got to take the crack at it. You got to throw it up against a wall and see what works. I think that's the big item up here. I'm kind of disappointed the fact I thought that we were going to be joined by the guy from WWOZ, but I guess he didn't make it.
We had some other people that's missing from Jackson, Mississippi as well. Funky Larry Jones.
When you're talking about applying mostly to broadcast radio, or do you have to follow the satellite radio?
Well, fortunately, in satellite radio, you're really calling two places. You're calling XM down in D.C., and you're calling Sirius in New York. So you are dealing with a lot of individual programmers within that. I mean, depending on what the record is, I can be on the phone with Sirius, for instance, on a Monday with probably half dozen outlets over one particular record because there's so many different outlets for it. Internet radio, I will tell you in all honesty, it's one of those things where it gets serviced if they report, but it's very hard to, because most of these guys are not operating under any kind of schedule that you can really get. I mean, I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but not everybody else is, and you're going, hello, play my record. And it's not, the guy's in his basement operating his station off of a Mac. It's awful tough. You can send them emails and et cetera, but that from a really practical standpoint is very hard. There are a lot of guys that claim to be doing internet radio. I don't know how they do it. And I'm not suggesting they're not. I just don't know how they're doing it because they're awful tough. But most of it is terrestrial. Most of what I'm dealing with is terrestrial and satellite radio. I also, by the way, one of the services, and this is another thing, is globalization continues. I happen to be, I made, in my particular case, establish a relationship a couple of years ago with Radio 2 at BBC in England. So I have a weekly conference call with their programmers also, because a lot of this music crosses over. and goes over there. And it's
Yeah,
on the international.
yeah. Well, we get some help from over at BBC. We'll and actually when they came, someone was in town recently, and we had our artists do about 6 or 7 interviews for them. So on BBC.
Well, the good news, yeah, radio. I mean, they do show up for Jazz Fest. I mean, they come to South by Southwest. So in a situation, it's open to you. It's available. They do accept submissions too. I mean, it's one of those deals. If you're looking to expand overseas, it happens to be a place where you can go. RTE in Ireland is becoming more and more receptive also, and ABC Radio in the Australian Broadcasting Company is becoming more. You can submit your stuff, and it's very easy to get the information off the internet how to submit your product overseas. So just remember, it's a good place to go, and it's a good place to start.
And I'll say this: we still submit. We've almost taken the step to do it otherwise, but we're still submitting physical CDs to stations. But there are some services out there now that will allow you to put them up on a site for download. And I don't know whether the stations themselves are jumping in on that or not, but.
There are, I'm glad you brought that up because there are a number of outlets for that. One of the biggest problems, though, if anybody is focusing on NPR stations, there are a lot of restrictions that are thrown on because their systems are integrated with the local universities, and they cannot download a lot of these MPEs and et cetera because it has a tendency, they're always afraid of viruses into the system and et cetera. So the majors are looking to make the transition. I will tell you that right now. Universal is going to take their shot, hell or high water, to no longer service physical discs after the first of the year. And I think it's wrong. I think it's really wrong. I know it's going to backfire. There's going to be a lot of crap come down. I mean, right now, I spend half my time going to the post office, I think. It's like, even at this stage, and guys I know who've been serviced who you're doing a reservice on. I think once that happens, everybody else will wait for a minute to see how bad it is, but they're all going to go. Because once one of them goes, it's going to be Sony BMG is going to jump in, the Warner Music Group everybody's going to go the same route. Because you know what? The only place they'll go is the hits. These guys don't have unlimited time. I mean, you have to understand, as badly as things have been cut back within the music industry, music directors are no longer, first of all, Clear Channel eliminated most of their music directors. I mean, they just blew them out. They just blew them out about 6 months ago, and they don't even exist. So you have a program director now, and you know what? If he sees, a total unknown, there's no shot he's going to go and listen to that thing or even attempt to download it. The only way you're going to get his attention is if it's, Elvis came back, and I'm talking Presley, not Costello. At least you get a shot. There's a package. There's something for him to feel, see, touch, etc. At that point, you can say, but they're not going to do it. It is the process, by the way, is not one of those processes. You're going to a link. It's a password-protected link. You've got to put in your password. Then you've got to load it into your hard drive. They got to load it, and then they've got to sit down and try to play it. It's not one of those things like you just put a CD in. The whole procedure for one track it's kind of involved. And my kids think I was born when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. I mean, if I can figure out how to do this, it's like, it's tough.
Yeah, you might get them to do that for the pop music that they have to have and they have to play. But it's just if you're trying to get someone to be at the top of that pile, like I said, you can't expect them to necessarily just go through all those steps to download it. As nice as it would be for us not to have to send out, and again, we're working on scales where we do a first printing generally in the neighborhood of about 5,000 copies, and we are printing 2,500 promotional copies at the same time. 1,500 of which are going to press, and about 1,000 are going to radio. And we do that consistently on just about every record. And then we're spending $2 or more to send a package with a CD and a one sheet and a bio. And then we're getting them back, and then we're getting people asking for reservice, and we're asking people to send us 2 and 3 copies. And when you do with a deal like WWOZ, we give them 25 copies at their station, or maybe 30, because we want to service all of the programmers that could possibly be playing our music.
I think what she was.
You said you run 5,000 copies, and half of them go to press and
Actually, we end up doing 7,500, 5,000 for sale, and 2,500 go to press and radio.
I think the question that you were asking about music, unknown music is not going to be played. I think that's what she was probably saying. You know, familiar music to these stations that you're talking about, like Clear Channel, they have to be charted somewhere down the line. An unknown artist, guess what? You may not even be heard.
There's, the one possible upshot of this whole thing, and then we're going to, a couple questions, and then we got to wrap it up, but the upshot may be, once again, as the multinationals continue to abandon this, it could be a real opening for the independents. Because you're in a situation, if you can afford to go through the process of getting your CD into their hands, you got a shot. If it's not a link, it's not something, that's just out there floating through the internet. It's there. It's in their hands.
Yeah, Marcus.
I want to ask you, could you all elaborate? I know there's a House bill that's traveling through Congress being introduced by Representative Congress in regards to radio stations having to pay royalties to
Well, to the artists.
yeah, to the artists.
Right. We're the only country in the world that doesn't, by the way.
Can you all elaborate how is that going to affect radio, and is it going to be advantageous to independent artists which may not be signed to the radio station may not have to pay large sums out? I want to elaborate on that because that is something that's right there on the horizon and is a big controversy, particularly between artists and the radio stations and the record companies.
Well, my attitude on it is I don't really know how I feel about it. I want radio play. When I send it out, when I spend the effort, when I spend all that money to send it out, I want radio play. I also want WWOZ to be able to afford to stay in business. So I also know that there's money being left in Europe that we're not getting our access to because we don't have a reciprocal agreement. So there's definitely both sides are from a record label standpoint, I can deal with either side.
By the way, also, the way that the program, that bill is, public radio, much the same way as performance rights, pays a lesser amount. They play a blanket, there's a blanket amount. It's not a per play basis. I think the greatest effect is going to be a commercial radio, if in fact it goes through. I am right now smelling like this is not going to happen, by the way. And I think one of the things where it gets, as you probably know, there was a situation where the FCC, at minority licenses, and I think the Black Caucus right now within Congress is probably going to block this thing from going through because of the impact it's going to have on community radio stations. And I think that's probably going to be the big part of the deal. So,
I don't think that's going to happen.
no. Anybody else? Young man, you had your hand up.
Well, I did. I was going to ask Mark afterwards, but you mentioned these 7,500 that you produced. Can you reveal what the best-selling, say, Michael White, or the best-selling Kermit Ruffin sold?
Our records sell generally in the 7,500 to 15,000 range. After within a couple of years. Especially Kermit Ruffins. Michaels are always consistently above 5,000. Kermits are always consistently above 7,500, sometimes higher. We've had records that have sold as much as like Los Hombres Calientes sold about 35,000. Teresa's something in that 7,500 range, but no, it's one of the problems. I mean, this is off subject, but downloads are, I believe, really kind of killing the album sales for sure. Teresa had a video talking about exposure. She had a YouTube video. She had a camera set up in the corner of her kitchen, and she's doing this one-woman show, and it's really quite spectacular what she does with live looping and all this stuff. It had 1 million hits on YouTube for the song "Na Na Na." But people could watch that song. They could watch it over and over and over again. They didn't necessarily have to buy it. And they also, when they did decide that they wanted to go get her album Hummingbird Go, or they might just have picked up Na Na Na, the people that did get driven to it. So, it's got its pluses and minuses being able to pick and choose a song. We create albums, and our artists create albums.
We got to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody. You guys have been great. And Mark and Chuck, thanks a lot. It's been terrific. A lot of fun.
Thanks.